Perhaps you're familiar with Patreon. Today I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that have been going on over at Patreon and maybe some things you want to give consideration. So there are some things that have been happening over on Patreon that maybe you're aware of, maybe you're not, but I thought we should talk about it today. If you're not familiar with Patreon, a little bit about it is it's a site by which people can subscribe or become a supporter of a creator or an artist or anyone like that, writer, blogger, whatever your creative art is. Video is a very popular version of that. And they can subscribe and support you with sort of some predetermined monthly donations or per video style donations. So you might decide that you're willing to give $5 per video to my creations, and every time I create a video, you would be charged $5 up to a maximum amount that you can set, or you might, depending upon how the creator sets it up, it might be a monthly charge or something along that lines. Subscription based in essence. As a subscriber, you would get certain benefits. Maybe it's early release, maybe it's exclusive content, or maybe it's commercial free, ad free content that's maybe hosted on YouTube or any other site that's out there. Many folks have moved to that model because they couldn't rely purely upon ad revenue from YouTube or through their other arts. Podcasts are doing it as well, so people can subscribe and have a way to pay without having to have paid sponsored ads inside of the podcast. It's just a sort of a crowdsourced method to fund people who are creating. One of the problems, though, is like all centralized applications that are out there, Patreon is in control of that, and they reap a fee, a percentage, usually about 10%, I think, is the average, for the amount that they collect for you. Now, granted, they are the transaction keeper. They're paying for any transaction fees or whatever that happen. So there is a cost to them for that, but what they provide back to you is basically 90% of whatever your subscriber base is contributing. The problem comes in that Patreon has made some decisions lately, not like a lot of other centralized applications, to take a stand when it comes to certain content. There have been a few things out there that have been put out there that Patreon has decided they're not going to allow happen. And so what they've done is they've basically kicked or banned those users, immediately removing their ability to earn or any of their contributions of their subscriber base. We've seen these things happen and have heard these stories obviously through other centralized apps. My friend John Olson has spoken many times about his experiences with PayPal at one point and how they created some issues for him in his business. And we hear these things often about YouTube, Facebook, so on and so forth, banning certain people without any method to sort of get back in touch with them and say, hey, what was this for? What did I do? And honestly, they're a private entity, so they're under no obligation to give you any notice if they don't want to. It begs the question that there are some creators who have made the decision to also expand into Patreon, but I think it's something you should consider when you're thinking about using them as a content distributor. Now, it's not to say that I don't think that you shouldn't spread around your eggs and not keep them into one basket. I think that is a good strategy. You should be wise in that way. But I think it's something to always keep in mind, to not come to be dependent upon any one source for your revenue if you are a creator. There are a lot of different ways in which people monetize their content. Some of them do ads or so forth, but their own ads, they sell ads, they become an influencer, right? They promote a product during the middle of it. We see a ton of Squarespace ads in everything we see. But Patreon's one of the ones that's now starting to take their own stance. The most recent person who has sort of made a decision to shift their own strategy before Patreon gets too crazy was a guy by the name of Sam Harris. If you're familiar with Sam, Sam is a popular writer. He's been on numerous television shows, but he has a very popular podcast as well. Now, I will say up front, Sam and I are polar opposites, perhaps, when it comes to philosophy on life. Some things I agree with, but as a general rule, he's seen as being an atheist on the side of on a heavy liberal side, which is fine. That's his position, which I have no problem with. It's just that I happen to be on the other side of that position. I believe in a God, and I tend to be more conservative. I would actually classify myself as a social liberal, but a fiscal conservative. But those who look at me or talk to me would probably say, you're not even really socially liberal. You're probably a little more on the conservative side of, or you're probably more of not even a social liberal, but you're more on the side of a social conservative, which is fine. Be that as it may, Sam has taken a stand, and he has decided to remove his Patreon page completely and to adopt his own personal subscription system within his website, which I think is probably a wise move for Sam. You see, Sam has decided that while he doesn't feel that he's doing anything that Patreon would necessarily hold him accountable for as far as pulling his Patreon site, he has seen what he's done to other people, and while he might not agree with the content that they're putting out, he also believes in freedom of speech. He believes that they should be able to say those things even if they're not agreed with the owner of the company of Patreon. Of course, Patreon has the right, as a private entity, to decide who they want to be affiliated with and who they don't. The point for you is that consider all these things when you're thinking about creating content and how you generate income and revenue, about who you align yourself with. It's not to say that you shouldn't participate in those, but that you need to always be cognizant of the potentials of those things. Someone pulls that page from you. How will that affect you? How will it affect your distribution? How will it affect your reach? The people that you spread your content through and how they find you or how they communicate with you. I saw this information about Mr. Sam Harris getting rid of his Patreon page on Twitter. Another centralized system, right? But we all participate in them. And hey, here's a secret. Those are not dirty words, right? Let's just all agree that we all probably use multiple versions of social media, and it's a great methodology to distribute our content or get our content out and to bring awareness. Whether that be that we want to bring awareness to blockchain or Steemit, DTube, cryptocurrency, whatever it is, we can harness that power and use it in many different ways. But it's another medium to communicate with, right? Think about that as you're creating content. Think about all the different methods by which you distribute information. Don't become dependent upon just one. That's my tip for today. Thanks for watching. See you again soon.